I'm WG, and in this video you will learn everything you need to know about our second ever limited and half anniversary celebration character, HEIDEMARIE. We will be talking about everything from the best epiphanies to potential decks, save data and character building over potential, pretty much everything across the board, as well as also how to understand and properly utilize the character. Timestamps will as always be on the timeline, so you can just jump to what interests you the most, especially if you already have a bit of a deeper understanding, or you can just watch the entire thing. And without further ado, let's actually get into HEIDEMARIE. The most important part for HEIDEMARIE is understanding how she works. So, to understand how HEIDEMARIE works, you need to be familiar with two different keywords. Keyword number one is quietus, and keyword number two is linked. So, quietus means that when a card gets discarded, it gets activated, and link is this connection. You see the connection between these two cards? That is what linked means. Now, this is where things this is like the crux of the matter. Linked and quietus go hand in hand. If a quietus card gets discarded through link, it gets activated. But if a linked card gets discarded through linked, it won't be activated. That is the most important fundamental you need to always keep in mind about her. So for example, here we're just going to get ourselves a couple more. We're just going to simply get ourselves a couple more link cards, and you can see the connection between all these here. What we also have is Hero to All. Hero to All is HEIDEMARIE's card that allows you to apply linked on cards that do not originally have linked, including them in this chain reaction that you'll see right here. So, linked and quietus. Preferably all your cards want to either be linked and quietus, or they want to have a discard effect. If a card has a discard effect and it gets discarded through link, it will trigger it. If a card has a quietus effect, the entire card will trigger when discarded. So that is the baseline, and that also means you always want to start your linked combo with a card that does not have quietus if needed, right? Because a card that does not have quietus doesn't have a way. Like if I start this entire combo here with Effulgent Blade, which is going to discard everything, this card will never play out due to it not having the quietus tag or a discard effect. And then the next thing you need to know, what makes Link so overpowered as a current buff in the game, and once you realize that, a lot of possibilities open up. Hand size limit. Have a look at this. So this card says that we create one blade, one of these blades, for each of our link cards in our hand. And if you count them, you see we have 9 link cards. All of our cards in our hand are linked. But what experience tells you is we only have one space open. So if we play the card, we should only create 2 and then cap out at the hand size of 10. But that is not what happens. What happens instead is this card specifically, for example in this case, will create 9 effulgent blades, the full 9. And the way this does it is by first discarding all of them and then creating the rest in your now open hand due to you having discarded your entire hand through linked. This is key, this is core to understanding how she works. And this is already pretty much the basics. If you understand this, you will try and you will be able to find and see connections between cards and interactions. And always keep in mind, linked cards, if they take an action, the link always happens first, it moves them out, and then, like for example, if a card has a create, right? It goes out first, and then there's the entire space for create where the link cards used to be. So before we now get into the epiphanies and the overall ratings, let's just quickly get all her cards out of the way so we all know how they work, right? So, Sword Rain here, the attunement effect just means whenever you draw this, it does what it says. In this case, it creates these effulgent blades. What is important for you about these is you can create as many effulgent blades as possible. They will never fill up your deck because they will always stay in your graveyard. But that also means if an effulgent blade moves from your hand into the graveyard without being played, you do not get access to it. You cannot like play it after without taking one of her specific epiphanies. Then here we have obviously the card with the massive amount of draw and the ability to link cards. This card right here is one of these perfect cards to just start a link combo because it gets extra damage per each in the chain, and as you can see it does not have the quietest tag unless you actually decide to epiphany it. So this is one of these perfect cards to just start a link chain with. Or Sword Rain, for that matter, would be that as well. And then Effulgent Expansion is just your way of creating even more Effulgent Blades. Like, for example, creating them and giving them damage boni in different values. Creating them and based on the amount of link cards, which we saw before. Or just creating them in the discard pile directly. Now you might be wondering, okay, but why do I want to create them in the discard pile if I don't get access? This is where Effulgent Compression comes in. This card is very unique in the way it works, not only because of the unique tag, but the way this card works is it is linked, so during any linked combo it will always get discarded. But the important part is it comes back to your hand 3 times in a row. And once this card comes back to your hand for the 3rd time, you can also track the amount of stacks by the amount of crystals below her HP bar, for example, if you're wondering what that is. Once it comes back to the 3rd time, the way this can work is you either discard it or it naturally moves from your hand into the graveyard at the end of the turn. So if, for example, you link it 1 time and then you discard and then you end your turn, you already have it discarded twice. And then it turns into this final card right here. And what this card does, it does a massive amount of already base damage in 600+% with maxed out potentials, and at E1 800+%. But more importantly, it exhausts every single effulgent blade you've stacked up in your graveyard up till then, because keep in mind, they will always be in the graveyard, they do not go back into your deck. And for every one exhausted, you get 100% extra damage. So just 10 effulgent blades, 1000% extra damage. And then you can do the math yourself, right? And the cool part is, at the end of the turn, this card just goes back to Effulgent Compression. And then you can discard Effulgent Compression again, and you get Effulgent Release. So that is her basics. And then we also have the ult. The ult also naturally benefits from you creating more effulgent blades, and that is upwards of 20 stacks, but at the end of the day it's just raw damage. So now that we know how her mechanic works and how everything interacts together, it is time for me to give you my current tier ratings for how good I rate these cards to be. I changed it from a number system, so tier 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, to a more understandable S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, so this should cause a lot less confusion, and it also looks a bit cleaner. Alright, and also obviously copy. Just because a card says copy doesn't mean you always have to copy it the moment you get it. It's just this card is good enough to the point where it would warrant being multiple times in a deck, and I'll give you a couple or a bits of extra information to specific cards and when it would be appropriate to copy them, and also I guess to which amount as well. So let's just start with Sword Rain. The very first Sword Rain gets S tier, the highest tier to give, and that is because this card now gets the added Quietus tag. As I said, Linked and Quietus go hand in hand. All of a sudden, this Sword Rain can be part of a linked chain and still activate and still trigger its damage. So that means you can now use any other linked card to start the link chain while still getting full value out of Sword Rain, as well as also getting an additional effulgent blade created every single time you actually end up drawing this card. So then next up we have Sword Rain in B tier, and that is because this one loses the link tag. It does not have the quietest tag. It goes up in cost, and what it gets, or what it kind of tries to make up for it with, is the fact that it now adds 1 hit per effulgent blade in hand. So in a hypothetical, it can be a 10 hitter, but it will be very difficult to get 9 effulgent blades and this in hand. So this will most likely pan out to be maybe between 5 to 6 hit, depending on how you try to set it up. And for the amount of effort and the cost and the fact that it's not a quietest card or anything the like, it doesn't really seem worth the effort, but it at least still also provides an effulgent blade. Though don't get me wrong, during a chaos run, when your only purpose is to clear the run, or during a sortie run, this card can still absolutely pack a punch, just not in a more deck building type of sense. Okay, now the next two are skill cards. The reason why skill cards in general are more desirable is because they have more potent, or in general stronger divine options available to them. Meaning that these automatically just rank higher in the copy targets than attack cards. You will always find that whenever we're talking about multiple cards in a character's deck, it usually ends up being a skill card instead of an attack card. Alright, now, double A tier here. I'm not entirely too sure about this A tier rating here. It could potentially be lower towards B as well. But what this card effectively does is, so long as you have 5 effulgent blades in your graveyard, it just triggers them a time and then uses them as an extra attack against the target. So long as you can just stack 5, this pretty much turns into a 5 hitter. But it loses the effect of creating any blades or being linked or being quieters, which might cause some competition. The next one here is you now create 2 effulgent blades and give a retrieve to them, effectively turning 2 blades into 4, because for the first time they are part of a link chain and move to your graveyard, they will come back to your hand so that you can use them again or use them as part of a next link chain. And yeah, skill cards, right? So available things here would, for example, be something like draw, right? Draw in a card game is just top tier, and only skill cards usually tend to have something with draw available as a divine. Why exactly that is the choice? It's a bit hard to say, but that is the way this goes in chaoszeronightmare. Now the final one, we have our first C tier and our probably lowest rated card out of them all. And that is a card that you can only use a single time, that automatically ends your turn when you use it. It at least stays in your hand until you do, but what do you get in exchange? You get a ridiculous amount of AoE damage, but also at a really high cost. And then as well, you know how we talked about the card that you discard 3 times and then it evolves into the purple card? When you have the purple card in hand with this card, this is like playing this card is going to exhaust your purple card, and in exchange, it is going to steal the plus 100% damage and effulgent blade exhaust effect from the card and apply it to itself. So effectively you can create probably the single biggest AoE nuke with a singular hit in the entire game. But why? Right? The only way this would make sense is if we get set into a fight, and in that fight we fight 3 to like 10 enemies, like between like 3 to 10 enemies, and all of them have like 100,000 HP. So that you are like, okay, maybe I should use AoE attacks, and then you find yourself stacking effulgent blades to then do a massive amount of AoE damage. It just, I don't know, right? That's what kind of warrants that C tier rating. It just seems super niche, especially because it only works a singular time and also ends your turn after. Now we are at the Hero to All card. Hero to All is core of what a HEIDEMARIE can do for you, and that is because it has access to a whole bunch of draw. So the very first one, S tier, reason why is because it has linked and quietus. Once again, the perfect combo. And when it is part of a link chain, so whenever you play it and it's part of a link chain, keep in mind, the link cards disappear from your hand first, then the other actions happen. So link cards disappear, hand space becomes free, Hero to All fills it up with 3 new cards. So that is what just makes linked and quietus such a good combo together, as well as also having the ability to draw or create after a linked chain. It just gives you effectively more hand size. So yeah, you draw 3 and you apply link to those. So if the cards are already quietus cards, that is already perfect. They just go part of the link chain. You use the attack, they get all used, they all get triggered. We are all very happy. But if they aren't quietus or discard related cards, this is effectively because it is quietus, so when you discard it, a 1 or 0 cost on discard, draw 3, discard 2. And the reason for this is because it will apply link to all the cards you've drawn. And if they do not have any quietus effect or discard effect, you can only play one of them, one of the 3 cards you've drawn, which is then going to trigger the link, which is going to trigger the rest of the cards, unless the cards obviously have a different way to be played, like for example a combo. So do keep that in mind with Hero to All. Now for the next one, this is just pretty much the same card, but it's missing linked. This is good or bad depending on how you look at it, and that is, using this card won't trigger a linked chain itself, and you can still just discard this card and you will get the effect, but you also won't be able to like fully take advantage of getting rid of the linked cards and then, you know, the hand size, but you could just play it after. So the only difference here really is the fact that instead of applying it to the 3 cards you draw, you can make use of this card in decks with characters that have higher cost cards like Rita, Caleb or 9, and make sure that their cards do not become linked, so that you will be able to hold onto the cards and effectively get 3 draw without any drawbacks whatsoever. Middle one sacrifices a bunch of draw, in exchange gets the haste keyword, because it's now 0 cost. It also doesn't need quietus, because you can just play it to 0. And this one specifically only applies link to quietus cards, meaning this will work in the majority, if not all decks, because it specifically targets a deck type. So whatever you draw with this, even though it's only 1, right? Or potentially 2, depending on if you find like a nice divine. That kind of depends on if these divines can even appear on draw cards, but that's besides the point. At least it's not gonna like apply linked and then discard your entire hand if you don't want that. So for the last 2 we have a B rating, and that is because this card can be used twice, and what it does is it allows you to pick 1 card from either the draw pile or the discard pile. Now here comes the important part. Draw pile is what you draw from. Discard is where cards go when you discard them, but then there's a third pile and it's called the used pile. That is where cards go that when they get activated, either by playing them or through anything that says activate a card then becomes used. Used cards can only be played again during the same turn if you have access to the move keyword. The move keyword, and specifically the graveyard as a target, right? So while this says move, there is not the graveyard in the target. You can only get cards that either have been discarded or you haven't drawn yet. Whereas if it were to mention the graveyard, this card would be utterly insane, because you could play any card and then just get it back and then play it again, regardless of character. So the main drawback here is the fact that it only mentions discard pile, and in this case not the used pile or the graveyard more specifically. And then for the final one, it's just a different way of drawing cards, and that is you can draw attack cards from her, so for example Swords of Rain, and then you also apply Link to all attack cards in hand, so not just her own, once again giving you a different way of targeting Linked, making sure that if with the right plan you can absolutely only apply Linked to whatever you wanted to apply to, so that you can play the turn exactly the way you want to play it. Alrighty, so that brings us to the last two. Though I guess as a last part, while this all says copy here, getting 2 heroes of all is kind of like the perfect balance. If you get too much, then they kind of also just end up just linking your entire hand and maybe doing too much. Though there is an exception. If your entire deck is Quietus or discard related, you can absolutely just get 12 draw that also has Quietus, that also links, that also discards everything, that also then draws. So unless your entire deck is built around it, 2 copies is kind of like the highest you're ever really going to need in terms of draw there. And outside of that, you might just be feeling like you lack a bit of power. Unless you want to run as like a pure support, then obviously you can go with more draw cards. Alrighty, now this brings us to Thread of Light. Thread of Light, the first one, like Thread of Light is the perfect linked opener card, the perfect card to use to start a linked chain, and that's because the base version here just already gets a massive amount per link card in hand, unfortunately, capped by hand size. The next one also has the haste keyword, becomes a bit more expensive, but in exchange, so long as your link has 3 or more link cards, you triple the damage instead of going by the number of links. So this one outscales this one right here, so long as you have anywhere from, I believe, like 8 to 9 to potentially 10 link cards in hand, whereas this one becomes incredibly effective the moment you have 3 link cards in hand total. My favorite, my absolute favorite, and a super solid card, and that is the Thread of Light. Once again, linked Quietus version, but not really for what you think, but for what it does. If this card is either in your hand right now or in your graveyard, meaning it has already been discarded or played, both work because graveyard means both use pile and discard pile, you add 80% damage to any linked cards. Keep in mind, we are all about the link keyword, creating these additional swords, these effluent blades. They are all linked cards. So you're effectively adding 4 morale that can be activated from in your hand or from the graveyard. Nice and simple, honestly, absolute top tier. This one though, there's a question mark, right? And that is because I don't really know how you could use this in a way that like makes it good. I mean, it says that it's going to trigger all the link cards in your hand without discarding them. What does it mean? Right? What does it even mean? And even if it just were to activate your entire hand without discarding it, how do you benefit from this? How do you make use of a card that costs 3 and also can only be used 1 time unless you end up copying it? Maybe there's some insane strategy here, which is why I'm giving it question mark for now. If you have any ideas, you can let me know down in the comments below. Okay, then here the Thread of Light, this one super straightforward. You can only have it once linked, and when you play it, you do 408% or obviously higher on your potential times 2. And if this card gets discarded instead, you do AoE damage. So you have the choice between single target or AoE based on using it or discarding it, which I think is quite neat, but by no means is it anything insane. Last one, almost through. Effulgent expansion. This first one, or honestly all Effulgent expansions are really damn good, as you can see on the ratings. So the first one, once again, linked and Quietus together. It creates you 2. And this creation also happens after the entire link is out of your hand. And also it boosts the damage of effulgent blades by plus 70% for a singular turn. So not only does it create them, it also makes them stronger. So this one is really good if you have a lot of effulgent blades. And this one right here is really good if you just have a few. And that is, instead of boosting every effulgent blade by 70, it just boosts the next two used by plus 200%. So yeah, instead of going small or yeah, I guess medium boost for a lot, you go huge boost for a few. So just kind of like a different approach, but keep in mind this card does not have linked, so it won't naturally be part of a link chain unless you apply linked to it. Could be good, could be bad, depending on how you shake it out. Now this middle one right here, the create effulgent blade for each link, we already talked about why this is so great, and that is, it is going to, if you have 10 linked cards in hand, create 10 blades, but it doesn't instantly create them. No, first the linked cards do their thing, and then it creates them. The only drawback on this card, I guess, would be the fact that it does not have quietus, so this is going to then always be required to be your linked chain starter, unless you, I guess, find a way to apply quietus to it, but I don't know or don't think there currently is a way to do that to a 2-cost skill card. This one here as well, create 6 effulgent blades in the discard pile, right? Whenever you discard your entire deck, or whenever you just discard it at any point in time, you start stacking and stacking these effulgent blades in your discard pile, hoping to just buff up your purple card as much as possible to a truly insane amount. Every single one of these adds 600% damage at E0 or 720% damage on E1 to your purple card every single time you use this. Keep in mind you don't have to pay for it because it is quietus. And then for the final one, another super solid option. If you do not feel like playing the leftmost or the leftmost once every single turn, you can just get this one. You play it one time at the start of every turn, you get 2, and you also boost the damage of effulgent blades by a permanent plus 50, shortening your deck, making your rotations easier, and overall, just making things happen. So these are all the epiphanies. I hope you were able to take away as much as possible, and let's get into the rest. And now I'll also give you some specific card combos as well as which to combine in a deck. These decks are all very easy to do, very easy to get going. And in this case, you don't even have to find the copy event. So we simply have our multi-hitter as well as the ability to create effulgent blades. You notice that it's a linked card. Here you have the ability to pull all the cards. You also apply link to them, but it doesn't really matter because all of these cards already are linked to begin with as well. They also all have quietus, so that they all trigger when you trigger your link chain. But the core idea here is super simple. You use your hero to all to just draw your deck. Make sure you get your linked cards that you want into your hand. So effulgent expansion in its create 2+ damage version. The Thread of Light as again another damage booster next to effulgent expansion, and then Sword Rain. And then at the time you're going to use effulgent expansion linked version as your combo starter. That is then going to discard your entire hand, which is then going to trigger the quietus effect right here, giving us 2 blades, and then also triggering effulgent expansion to create us a whole bunch of blades, giving us a second wave that we can then play after next to the blades we already created with, for example, Sword Rain. So super simple deck, super straightforward, and what you could, for example, do is you could get an additional copy of Sword Rain in there, you could get an additional copy of effulgent expansion in there, or you could just keep it like this, nice and simple, with just 2 extra copies, which also allows plenty of save data space to further customize with persona cards, with neutral cards, and so on and so forth. So our next one would be the Effulgent Blade Stacking Big Boom, where you work your way towards the Effulgent Release after fully stacking this one up. So then here the idea is pretty simple. You have 3 to 4 copies of creating a bunch of Effulgent Blades in the discard pile. You'll never have to pay for them, you can just discard them. And then just as bonuses, you just make sure that your cards become a little stronger, but honestly it's not that important. The Thread of Light could also be a different one, or you could hypothetically cut it completely as well. I think that would be totally fine. So for example, a deck like this, seeing as how we are still below the 5 card cut limit, and then here we just have an ability to create more Effulgent Blades so that we can fill up the graveyard a bit faster. What would also be possible here is, for example, something like the Retrieve Effulgent Blades, then again in combination with the damage increase, or any of these Thread of Light versions, for example. It's just just to give you a bit more of an idea, but the entire idea is here: big boom, Effulgent expansions, get them, and also, for example, the 4th copy, you can either get additional one here or an additional one here, and then you just pretty much press your big nuke button that you could technically stack into eternity. And now our final combination would simply be you creating a bunch of Effulgent Blades and truly just from Heidemarie alone boosting this as high as possible. So you have the 70% bonus here, 70% bonus here, so you have this twice. You once again create a massive amount after your first wave. You make sure that you also add the 80% from a Thread of Light through this one. And then you also make sure that you create some Effulgent Blades once you just draw this card, and it also has Quietus, so it just gets used in the beginning. Again, this also, so this then gives you your kind of like your third approach, full on raw damage boosting, all in on Effulgent Blade, where you then still also end up with the finisher, but the finisher doesn't play as big of a role in that damage as with the last build. Team time. What kind of team comps should you be running with Heidemarie? Important to note here, Heidemarie can run with absolutely anyone in any scenario. She is just that good. But if you want to get the most out of Heidemarie, if you want to have the smoothest gameplay experience, if you want the best synergies, this is who you should pick. So here we have our sub DPS slash support DPS, right? Sub DPS or secondary main DPS, and on this side we have our supports slash our healers. So let's start on this side first. By far, as of this moment, Nia is the best character to be used alongside a Heidemarie. But I guess, you know what, we actually forgot about a little someone, and that is Mr. Cassius. Do not forget about Mr. Cassius, he's actually part of the gang. But Nia is going to just give you the most in terms of discard value, extra attack synergies, the healing through extra attack, so on. The also the bonuses on discarding cards, not just with the healing, but also potential extra attack damage follow-ups, or the ability for her to just discard cards straight up herself. And then we have these, like the big other 4 options, I guess big 5 you could say, and that is Mika, a character can always use more AP. Getting more AP on a Heidemarie allows you to pull off more combos. Nausea, Heidemarie attacks so much that you will be able to get your value out of your Nausea, that you'll be able to get the stacks. You can also build Nausea more towards just having fewer cards, also meaning more upgrade cards as well. So that, for example, you don't even really run into an issue where the Nausea cards get discarded. Typhara, kind of same with Mika. Damage boosting for Heidemarie, plus the ability to also generate you a bunch of AP. Same is true with Nausea. Obviously, Nausea also has her damage buffs, especially for characters that attack a lot like Heidemarie. And then Ray. Ray right here. Yeah, Ray is just the perfect, the perfect additive damage bonus character. the ability for her to provide you a bunch of morale stacks. The more times a character attacks, the more times a character hits per attack as well, the more effective additive buffs become. Ray overall always a solid option, also brings draw and potential exhaust so that you can get rid of cards you want to get rid of to the table. And then my boy Cassius, he gets the healing done, he gets the discards done, he gets, yeah, he might not just get enough attention, so keep him in mind when you think of HEIDEMARIE. Now the two biggest ones as like supportive type / secondary DPSs to be used with the HEIDEMARIE are going to be Diana and Renoa. Diana with her sharing the same quietus mechanic as HEIDEMARIE and the interactions between their kits. Renoa with her plentitude of creating cards to then be able to be discarded, but also all of her cards having a way to take advantage of them being discarded themselves. More importantly, her dirge bullets, a main mechanic, don't mind getting linked. It doesn't affect Renoa at all whatsoever. And yeah, those are like the two big ones. And then the other 5 here. So the first one is the characters that don't have a lot of cards. The characters that just chill there and then attack based on your character. So Veronica just creates her ballistas and shoots her ballistas, provides a bit of draw support here and there, but effectively HEIDEMARIE and Veronica, they don't interact. Then Selena, you're going to get the you're going to have the ability to just do a bunch of follow-ups. She has 3 different ones. Follow-ups on attack cards, which HEIDEMARIE has plenty. Follow-up on effective hits, on weakness attack hits. So if you face a passion enemy with a HEIDEMARIE, Selena will trigger. And then also specifically, she has a upgrade card that automatically follows up on passion attack cards used or on passion cards used. HEIDEMARIE, there you go. And then we also have ourselves the dog himself, Hugo. Very few cards, again, provides a bit of draw extra, but also has the ability to benefit from HEIDEMARIE and follow up on her attacks. And then here, also kind of for a similar reason, Magna. Magna can just chill here, she can provide the shield, she can make your team more tanky, but Magna also is all about upgrade cards. So once you have those cards out of the way, HEIDEMARIE pretty much has free to play and Magna just kind of does her own thing alongside of her as well. 9, you can never really go wrong with a 9. You will always be able to find ways to just get out a Hue or get out the Ironclad Hue or find a way to not end up discarding it, because that'd be pretty sad, but 9 is just that good. And then for Caleb, it's kind of in a similar vein to Magna, where, for example, what you could do is, even if Caleb's Vulture Launchers became linked, you can still play a 2-cost card to trigger the link chain, which should activate her Vulture Launchers, effectively making her main damage source immune to getting link discarded. Alright, so last few meters, stick with me. Partner, we already talked about it. Sylvia is the best option. If you can get her, get her. But if you cannot, or if you will get her later and you wonder who should you be playing at the moment, the top tier options are, for example, going to be including Marin. Marin is going to provide you the attack, she's going to provide extra damage, and you also do use skill cards on HEIDEMARIE, so you also get the flat damage amount to extra attacks, and you also get the skill that just gives you a bit of AoE, but also the ability to search for a skill card. So Marin is probably your next best bet for now in terms of general ranger partners. And then after Marin, I would probably, pick out Solaya. The reason why I don't really recommend Hugo is because Hugo's partner, Tina, she is a bit too order-coded. So Solaya from the Battle Pass, if you have her, perfect to be used, nice and simple. You get the attack bonus, you get extra damage bonus, and you also get a damage bonus to attack cards every time you draw for the first time each turn, which, as we all now know, HEIDEMARIE is pretty proficient in. And then you get a good ego skill in damage and mark. And keep in mind, these battle pass partners are ones you can work on later, so you will always be able to get more dupes and potentially make these additional effects even stronger. Now then, right here we have ourselves Rosaria. Rosaria is kind of an insane partner. Might even be more insane than a Marin and Solaya, where the only drawback would her only having 100 attack added to the base attack, but she more than makes up for it with the ridiculous 16% attack, 20% extra damage. But then the biggest one, when you use a upgrade or skill card, you can end up with a pretty much deck full of skill cards on somebody like a HEIDEMARIE, and then you have the chance to get multiple stacks of morale, which each are 20% extra damage, or 20% more damage, better said, added to all of your actions that your HEIDEMARIE is going to take. And you could even potentially use this as a simple draw one, or you could deck fish for example, her upgrade card. And then we have Daisy. Daisy's kind of, in my mind, always usually just like a weaker version of Rosaria, and that is because you get the same attack buff, you get the same extra attack damage buff, but the ego skill is worse. And this one here only says that when the assigned combatant draws for the first time each turn using an ability, so you can only trigger it one time per turn, you have a 40% chance of one morale stack. So Sylvia, Rosaria, and then Marin and Solaya should also be on your radar when it comes to partners. Potential time. So for potential, you can max out the basics. You could keep this at +8 because it's going to save you this boss material. I kind of learned it a bit the hard way. I accidentally brought it to 9. You just want to make sure you get the basic attack proficiency just for like ease of use during a chaos run. And then your goal is to first max out the crit chance and unlock the unique stat potential, right? You don't have to max it out to get there, but you get this potential. You only need 800 attack, and then 700 even. You only need 700 attack, and then you get 15% passion attribute damage. Then you want to max out the crit chance because you already get a massive amount of crit damage from, for example, the partner. So you want to max out the crit chance. And after that, you're going to have a look at the unique cards. You want to make sure you get that up to like the 8 out of 10. And then with the moment you have the materials, whenever you do, make sure you get it to the 10 out of 10. And then crit damage is going to be the last priority out of kind of this row right here. And then if you have the materials lying around, if they are open, you can consider going for the 25% divine chance increase, because HEIDEMARIE, you will be using her for a long time, and she is worth that extra investment of, what does it even add up, 56 crystals, as well as also 4 golden ones and 4 of the veiling ones. But keep in mind, you don't need it to make some good decks. It just makes it around 5% more likely to get a divine, because it increases the base divine chance at around like 20% by 25%, so by 5%. So, memory fragment time. The best in slot set for HEIDEMARIE is going to be the Prelude of a Hero set with a 2-piece crit damage set, but you could also use a 2-piece attack set if your substats are better there than on crit damage. But this is the optimal way to do it, where you get 15% crit chance and 25% crit damage from the, pretty much from the set. And then after that, there is, you could say, 2 more options. Option number 1 would be 35% crit damage 4-piece that you gain for 1-cost cards, due to most of her cards, especially also her damaging card outside of the big nuke. So her basically the cards that she creates, that she spams, those being 1-cost cards, so that is a possibility. And then depending on how you're looking, or more importantly, if you're picking up the singular upgrade card that she has, if you do pick up the upgrade card that she has, you can absolutely run her on a Spark of Passion set for the 20% passion damage amount increase. But what you will most likely be running is either this 4-piece, 2-piece, or just a straightforward 2-piece, 2-piece combination that then would look something like this, where you just get 2 attack pieces, 2 crit damage pieces, and then as best substats as possible with 2 offstat pieces. So that would be the set effects and the sets you want to run. This set is now available in the newest dungeon. It's at the very top in simulation, and there's also another top tier set in terms of a support next to it. But what you obviously are curious about as well is what are the main stats, what are the substats, what's kind of the priority. So the main stats are actually a bit more contentious this time, and that is on the left side. It obviously doesn't matter, but here we go attack, or let's go from top to bottom. We go crit chance, passion damage, attack. But the goblet this time isn't actually as fixed. The goblet actually has 2 different ones that are good, and that is going to be both attack and passion damage, where the only deciding factor is where do you have better substats. That's the only difference maker between attack and passion damage really, and the reason for that is because you get the same stat you already get from your goblet by her potential, making it a little, or depends on how you want to formulate it, less potent than if you had no source of passion damage bonus. So crit chance, passion damage, or attack depending on what you have with better substats, and then attack. Now in terms of substat priority, at the very tippity top is going to be crit rate, or crit chance in this case. The amount of crit damage you get from the set, the amount like the 2-piece set from her partner and from substats, it gets so high that getting crit damage subs as substats for her, just they end up being less valuable because you're adding just a few to already a whole lot what is already there. So crit chance is the main stat because you want to make sure you hit the crits to take advantage of your massive crit damage. Crit chance is at the top. Then you're going to have pretty much 4 that all kind of compete for the same space. And that is going to be your attack percentage or attack flat. Both are about equally as valuable. Doesn't really make a difference what you get, or you get obviously both. But then you also have extra damage and crit damage. Due to crit damage already being so prevalent, extra damage becomes more valuable, but what you gotta keep in mind, extra damage only applies to her specifically with her attacks from the E2 or with the card she creates. So from the E2, extra damage gets another bonus in terms of value, but for example, these attacks here, the 93%, or this attack card right here, this does not benefit from extra damage, rather it benefits from crit damage. So that's why kind of crit damage and extra damage kind of share that same slot, that same value. And that is pretty much it, right? You want crit chance as the most important one. You want as much as you can reasonably get your hands on. And then you just want to get some attack, you want to get some crit damage, you want to get some extra damage. And this is kind of how my, I guess, day one set looks. I saved up a bunch of materials. I also saved up a bunch of crafting, crafting items to dedicate craft. But what we have here so far, I might as well show it to you. We have attack with some good crit chance, flat attack, and some extra damage. This one is a recent addition. Man, I got soul broken by the rolls, but passion damage, crit chance, attack. This one here is an older piece. I've had this for quite a while. Crit chance with crit damage sub and a bit of extra damage. This one here, we have some attack, we have some crit chance, and then we have a bit of defense, because why not? But overall, the more important part is we rolled a very decent 5.4% crit chance. And then here, this piece has, good amount of extra damage, good amount of crit damage, a bit of attack. You can see that here this piece is in fact missing crit rate. So this is one of those pieces I might just work on in the future. Here the problem would be, it would be rolling defense. And here again, missing crit rate, and this would be missing both extra damage and crit damage. And then for our final piece, we have some crit damage, crit chance, extra damage, and attack. So our final stat line, if you want kind of like a goal to aim for, keep in mind with a 5-star partner, so that's why our attack might be higher. We have 930 attack, also keep in mind 18 affinity, 930 attack, 57.3% crit rate, 205% crit damage, 31% passion damage. Your attack would be higher if you were to use an attack goblet, and then around 20+% extra damage is kind of one of those like stat lines you can then aim for. Obviously it doesn't have to happen day one. So, dupes. How important are her dupes? Which dupes? So, perfect stopping points, really as if they were made for it, are E0, E1, E2, E4 and E6, right? Those are the points where you would consider stopping. And yeah, E0 totally fine. You can still absolutely shred things, and it's not like her gameplay changes in a major way through any of these duplicates that you're like, oh, I need them. But the E1 is very, very potent. It adds a huge bonus to the base multiplier, and it also makes every single effulgent blade in your graveyard a lot more valuable. So this is definitely on the stronger end that we've seen from E1 so far. The E2 here just makes sure that you will always get effulgent compression at the start of a battle. You move it to hand, so you never have to draw it. So effectively it's like draw 1 effulgent compression at the start of the battle, and you also gain a new stack. You always get 5 stacks of this, and what this says is when a link card is either played or discarded, you do an extra attack to an enemy. This can stack up to 8 times, and it gets used every time you do it. So you just do effectively 120 times 5 extra damage to an enemy. This does scale with extra damage items, with morale, with anything else that affects overall the damage amount. Now the E3, while yes it is nice that you go up in multiplier and that it hits harder, it really isn't that relevant. It's an ult, you're gonna use it at some point. Yes, it hits like a truck, but it really isn't that important. This is really only like the stepping stone to the E4, where the E4, after you having manually used or discarded 10 HEIDEMARIE cards, all HEIDEMARIE cards will have plus 50% damage, so you just add plus 50% on top of all the cards, which, it gets the job done. It's a nice damage bonus, and it is definitely something noticeable. But then we get to this one right here, which just overall boosts all multipliers of the character by 6%. So you take a character's base card and then you multiply by 1.26 instead of 1.2. But now this is the big one. How insane does this really turn out to be? It's a bit hard to say. I will test it at some point, but for now we still are cruising E0. And that is effulgent blades now turned rainbow. Meaning the effulgent blades created will always be type effective. So they always do extra tenacity damage. They always do and get the 25% type effectiveness multiplier. But what is even more important is the increase to the Crimson Blade damage. So Crimson Blade is the effect of the E2, and in this one caps at 120%. But now you're adding 40% damage amount to it every time it is used. So through turn 1, you add 200% to it. Because if you use it 5 times, then you add another 200%. And then in turn 3, you'll add the final 2 after 12 uses by plus 480%. By no means do you have to get there, but this is one of those goals to work towards with your Omega dupes. And it is, one of the E6s in the game for sure. And I mean, doesn't this card just look beautiful? Alright, we've made it to the end. Let's talk about my save data. And first and foremost, just farm on the seasonal planet. If you want to farm a save data, don't question it too much, don't think too much. You go into the season and you head into the chaos. You play difficulty 8. you spam reobserve however, alright, however long it takes, until you get this notification. Then you stop and then you play that map. So now you can pretty much just spam the button and you can't unreroll tier 15s. So you want to play tier 15 on difficulty 8. That is still absolutely the way to go. And that then now means, yeah, what do you do with your save data? What do you put in? There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that is available to her. There's a lot of things that are good. And before we specifically talk about cards, how about we take a brief stint and talk about items? So this glove is like made for her. It fits her like a glove. After 5 extra attacks, you get 2% crit chance each. So per turn, you can get up to 10% crit chance. And then depending on what kind of buffs you get, just make sure if you get like a persona buff, it also applies to her, right? Like the best ones are going to be like link card damage or morale gain or something based on graveyard size, something along those lines. Then a funky new chess piece we have is when attacked, you add resonance to the attacker, which means when you discard cards, you will do a follow-up attack, right? Whenever, and this can stack up to, this can happen 3 times per turn. So when you get attacked 3 times, you apply 6 resonance stacks, which should not be underestimated. And then we have the no-brain dimensional cube. When a card is discarded by anyone, HEIDEMARIE in this case gains upwards of plus 45% damage. Now, here we have another one, and that is the Key of Sleep. The Key of Sleep says you add 40% damage to attack cards, but the moment you target 2 or more enemies, the damage goes down by 10%. So you lose 10% against 2, 20% against 3, and 30% of it against 4 targets. So made for single target enemies. And if you can find something like on extra attack morale, or when 40 or more cards are in the graveyard, if you play like a graveyard stacking build, gain morale, or something like this, when 15 or more cards in the graveyard gain critical damage to attackers of this unit, right? That's like an example of kind of these like, yeah, perks to look out for. This dice right here, it's a bit too random. It doesn't really do all too much. Yeah, I don't really think it's worth it. At least it's shiny. This weapon is always a no-brainer. Second method always works. And on the note of weapons, keep in mind the Cthulhu gun. The Intellect of Discord, I think the name is. The 18% damage increase when Cthulhu invades your runs. That card is, or that weapon is still going to be the best in slot. 100%. And yeah. Let's see if we have anything new. We also have the Orders Baton, which is a new item. You can see the icon for the Song Upon the Stars, so Season 3 item. Each time a card is created, which is pretty easy for her, plus 20% damage amount, so you also arrive at plus 40% damage. We have a good old mainstay in Amorphous Cube. And yeah, that is kind of the main items you'll be on the lookout for, really. And then in terms of like teammates, anything that interacts or boosts damage on and mentions allies in the description is always welcome. So what exactly have I done with my save data? What exactly am I looking for? What exactly did I cook up? So first off, let's talk about persona cards. And that is, if you can, you want to create a persona card similar to this. The base is going to be discarding up to 2 cards, and per discarded you get a damage bonus, because this damage bonus is insane, not just for HEIDEMARIE, but pretty much for every single character in the game. And the way you can make this work specifically and also make it kind of foolproof is by having this card trigger when discarded, so you don't actually have to pay any AP to play it, kind of simulate something or simulate something closer to a quietus. And then for the final one, you can just get a damage amount increase, or if you know what you're doing, you could go with a double damage amount increase. So this would be like a raw damage boost for persona. If you feel like it, you can also just leave it out, but I think it's just it wouldn't really fit as much, right? So the discard 2 is my premier choice. But outside of the discard 2, there's a couple others I currently consider to be worthy. And that is, for example, going to be this one right here. Ranger exclusive, so available to your HEIDEMARIE. A simple draw 2. Keep in mind you can once again combine this with the ability to be played for free when discarded. So you'd have a 0 cost draw 2 per attack card drawn, a coordinated trigger as well as any other combinations and buffs additions you find to be placed on this persona card. And then as a third card, let's see what would I consider potentially useful. The quietest one, right? The one that uses, let's see if we can find it. A unique. This one. The one that allows you to discard a quietest card from your draw pile. So the more quietest cards you have and the more you interact also with other quietest cards, this can be quite valuable. It is also quietest card itself. So if you discard this, you also discard another card from the deck. Here you can again add something like plus 30% damage to both slots. You do not need to use the discard option here because this card already has quietest inbuilt. So giving you a bit more options of how you want to build up the persona card. And yeah, then at the moment, my absolute favorite in terms of neutral cards, there is a specific event where you find the Faceless Woman. The Faceless Woman says that when a link card is used, so when you play a link card, you draw 1. Simple and straightforward. The link cards, you use them, they go out of your hand, and then you just draw 1. One draw, upgrade card, can be repeated every single turn. Nice and simple, just 20 save data, and can in fact actually end up being worth it. So that is what I've mainly done in terms of gear, in terms of added cards. And then I've tried around, I've played around with quite a few things. Like for example, we got this fun deck where we create blades and make them retrieve at 0 cost. Something like 1 draw divine probably would have been possible as well. Here we just have our standard Thread of Light for the damage bonus. And now the ability to just discard all the effulgent blades we create while also creating even more after. Because why not? Combined with the damage boosting persona. This one right here, I'm not too sure if I did too much. I'll be entirely honest, I am not too sure if I did too much and if I went overboard. But we have the ability to create them in the discard pile. The ability to create based on our hand. The ability to create and boost their damage. Boost their damage even further with linked quietus. Draw us more cards. But also, we have activating effulgent blades that are already in the graveyard. So for example, right here we can create 6 and then while they're in the graveyard we can activate them and get some nice damage out of them. And the rest is just rounded out by a persona card that, because I wasn't able to find the discard one, is raw damage. And this one here is obviously your effulgent release. The main draw for me for this deck was just the fact that we get some really nice persona perks in 1 morale here, 2 morale here, and 15% crit damage. So I just thought, hey, why not? Though I feel like I maybe should have gotten here the version that creates effulgent blades instead of the one that activates them. Yeah. Also, do not underestimate Quietus cards that have draw 1. This card will get activated, it will create its stuff, but it will also draw you a card. So never underestimate something like a draw 1 neutral. You can always be on the lookout for that. and that could be the glue that kind of puts your deck together. Here we also, for example, found the new divine that allows this card to be a combo card, which means not only could this card trigger on being discarded or be part of a link, but this card could also activate, which means it would protect it from being part of a link. So this was the idea behind the combo here. The combo is obviously a lot more potent on different epiphanies, but the idea here is, if this card is already part of a link, how do you actually get it out of the link without triggering the entire link? And that's why we kind of have combos, so we can use a different card to trigger this one. It was just, yeah, I guess mainly me having fun. And yeah, so far I can't wait to build more HEIDEMARIE decks, and do let me know down in the comments below what you think about HEIDEMARIE. Peace.